Hello, everyone. Is the audio? Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm Shruti Upadhyaya. I'm a chair of Students and Early Career Subcommittee, which is AGU's Hydrology Section's Precipitation Technical Committee. We call ourselves ECSPrecip. We actually bring in young scientists interested in different aspects of precipitation related research with the goal to better connect with students and early career scientists in the domain and providing them opportunities for networking, professional development, and recognition. So our subcommittee is striving to facilitate an open, inclusive, and collaborative environment for students and young scientists in the field. So today's event, traditionally, we started this 2 years ago, and it was always happening online. This is the first time we are trying to make it happen in person with a lot of struggles. So I would like to thank each and every one of you for accepting to come in person at the last week. I think last 2 weeks back, we got the confirmation. So it's very delayed invitation, but still you all made it. Thank you so much for that. So the main goal of this event is to bring in speakers in different career stages who are working in precipitation field, mainly to share their experience throughout their career. So this is specifically focused for students and early career scientists to ask and discuss their queries regarding different career paths and challenges in this domain. So this event, actually, since we had some issues with having AV and other things, we formulated it as a mainly panel discussion. So we'll keep asking them questions, and in between, if you have any questions related to anything, please raise your hands and ask questions. And for online attendees, you can post your questions in the comments so we can take it. Okay. So with this, I'd like to hand over to Lisa Milani, who is a deputy chair of Precipitation Technical Committee, and we both will be co-hosting this session together. And I would like to thank all the 3 speakers for accepting our invitee and joining us.
All right, so we start introducing Dr. Yixin Berry Wen. I did it right. She earned her master's degree in geoinformatics and her PhD degree in meteorology at University of Oklahoma. She did her postdoc in atmospheric physics and weather group at NASA JPL. Then she was a research scientist at the Cooperative Institute for Severe and High Impact Weather Research and Operations at University of Oklahoma, a National Severe Storms Laboratory at NOAA. She's currently an assistant professor in the Department of Geography, University of Florida. She's also a member of the User Working Group in NASA Goddard Earth Science Data and Information Service Center. Her research interests include radar and satellite precipitation retrievals, ground validation of remote sensing products, applications of the advanced machine learning technologies in earth science, and climate injustice. All right, so we go straight with the first question. Barry, what? Yeah, we are already started there. The panel discussion, right? What first got you interested in the topics you choose to study?
So I actually did not include my bachelor's degree. I got my bachelor's degree in ecology. So I was doing the climate model, how they consider for the response to the climate in 100 years. Then I got frustrated because the scale is too large. I cannot code it. But because we don't know the simulation, the climate in 100 years, the simulation will be correct or wrong. Yeah, then I noticed for weather, I can do it immediately. Yeah, so that's why I went to the meteorology program. I said, hey, can I take a degree here? At least I can do, if I can, I know the results, right? I know my research is if it's wrong or right.
Right.
So, okay.
Thank you. Then Rachel, same question to you.
Are you, okay, you're not introducing us?
No.
Okay. Are we introducing ourselves or are we just going to the question?
I'm gonna introduce you later.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so, well, my name's Rachel McCrary and I'm, I would say I'm a climate scientist. I've always been a climate scientist. And I started at UCLA as an undergrad. I had no idea what to do. So I was a math econ major because I liked math. And econ was not going to work out for me. And I'm from Los Angeles and I did not pay attention to the weather. It's very boring there. So we used to get booklets of course materials, and we probably don't get this in school now at all, but we got like a physical book. And I started looking through what my math classes and my computers classes would relate to. And I got as far as atmospheric science in an alphabetical list. And there was a class on climate change and public policy being taught by Alex Hall. It was when the AR3 had come out in 2021. And I was just really interested in being able to use all of the technical things I like to do, but work on really human relevant problems. And so I think at that time I envisioned myself becoming like someone who worked with public policy on climate change. But that's how I even learned that this was a field, was the course booklet at UCLA.
Awesome. Please.
Oh, great. Grab my script sheet here.
Yes, those.
I made some notes beforehand just so I don't make a fool of myself. Well, I'm a geographer and I've always been interested in geography, how things relate to each other, distribution of things, and of course, weather is one of the, I suppose, most dynamic elements of geography you can think of, with just temperatures and precipitation and everything. So when I was at school, now of course coming from the UK, school means sort of pre-18 rather than college. I did geography and unusually also did maths and physics as well, and electronics. And this was sort of frowned upon at the time, thinking, why do you want to do all these science things and geography? But when you think about it, on the physical side of geography, it's all interrelated. So it's actually a very, very good sort of combination of things to do. So that sort of really got me into these sort of physical geography aspects. When I was at University of Nottingham, where I did my first degree, I did remote sensing and what was then called automated cartography, which really was the precursor for GIS. GIS did not exist then. So, that sort of was again on the technical side of things. And then when I did my postgraduate PhD at Bristol, I did passive microwave rainfall estimation over land, which was the first study, I think, at the time into that subject. So, all sort of very interesting things.
What year are we talking about?
Well, I got my PhD in 1988. So a long time ago, a different era, different lifestyle.
Perfect.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. So now we'll introduce Dr. Rachel McCrary. Rachel is a project scientist too at National Center of Atmospheric Research in the Research Applications Laboratory Regional Integrated Science Collective. Her research is primarily focused on understanding future changes in the North American precipitation, snowfall, and surface snowpacks. She worked with global, regional, and statistically downscaled climate information to help stakeholders and decision makers understand the potential impacts of climate change. She is currently leading a NOAA MAPP funded project to understand storm scale changes in precipitation and snowfall associated with extratropical cyclones over United States. Thank you. So next question we have, let's start with Rachel. What's the biggest challenge you faced during your career?
So I also went through, I don't have crib sheets, but I did go through them. So I have actually 3 that I want to point out here that I think are not always spoken about. The first is mental health. I don't think that we're very open about mental health challenges going through graduate school, being in the research career, that it impacts almost all of us at some point in our lives. And that's something that I have a historical family history of and something I've dealt with. And I think that's something I try to be open with. It's like, you can be a successful scientist and still struggle with mental health. You just need to talk about this with people. It's also being a very type A, high achieving person. And then you get into a really competitive environment that can kind of spiral into really hard places. So that is something that's been a challenge that I deal with off and on throughout my career. The second thing is I am what we call like a soft money scientist, and I'm in a very soft money position right now. So the biggest challenge here is maneuvering the science that I'm interested in and the science I can get funded and the projects I can work on and what that means now in terms of a career vision and being known. And I think that's one of the things where that's a really big challenge is it's not always like I'm an expert in this one thing. It's that I have these skills, I have these interests, but this is what I can do. And the third thing is that career doesn't always follow passion or desire. Sometimes it follows family relationships and other challenges. We have to pick sometimes where we want to live because our family is there versus where we may want to have a job. And so that is something that can really influence your career trajectory and has influenced mine as well. So those are kind of the challenges I faced.
Thank you. Same question for Chris.
I guess for a lot of young people starting out, it's, as it were, getting on the ladder and actually getting your name known around the place, applying for those research grants, which will help support you, but also sort of help develop your career in the future. And I think, as you said, I mean, one of the issues that you face all along the way is, you know, continual pressure. I mean, pressure in terms of funding, pressure to get things published, pressure. I mean, there's always a lot of, dare I say, self-inflicted pressure to do things. You don't tend to have a boss who actually tells you you've got to do this. It's, you know, that internal pressure, which you have to sort of, you know, control, you know, to a certain extent. Otherwise, you just end up sort of consumed by your research. The thing about family issues is actually, I suppose, also important because when I came out to the States, my younger daughter was just finishing high school and going off to university. And so she was in that transition period. We were trying to sort of move out here and she was moving off to university. And, you know, it was a big mess at the time. Now, thankfully, sort of things have settled down now. And so, you know, but it is something you do face if you've got a family. You know, what do you put first? Do you put your research career first? Do you put your family first? So there are all these sort of tensions involved.
Okay, so the first challenge I ever met is a transition from a student to a scientist. I was a very good student. I was very good, always like to rank the first because I'm good at doing the exam. Yeah. Then suddenly when I started my graduate program, I realized, okay, for exam you have the questions there, right? But for science, for this project, a lot of times I don't know where is the questions. Then, I mean, I blame myself a lot of times. I think why I'm so stupid. I even do not know where I can find the questions. Now, actually, people told me, hey, scientific questions is the most difficult questions you can ask. To find a good scientific question always takes a lot of time, experience, a lot of reading, a lot of communication that you can target one. Okay, so this is the first thing, transition from a student to a scientist is the first challenge hit me. The second challenge for me is the sense of fulfillment. So I got my first paper published very fast, like the first year when I transferred from ecology to the meteorology. Yeah, but at that time I did not realize why I want to publish this paper. And later, when I talked to other students, I found this is like a very common issue for us, especially if you go to AGU, you can see so many posters, right? So you spend a lot of time, you did a lot of work, then you get some work out, but can people see your work? You are not even, cannot be seen by others, right? Then what's the meaning of your research? What's the meaning of your research? So this always tortured me a lot in the past. So then I realized we need to find something. It's like not only this project, your boss asks you to do that, right? You need to try to see the whole picture. You need to know why, for example, I was doing the ground validation, right? Why you want to do this? What kind of logic gap you are feeling right now, then to give you the sense of successful, the joy to do the work. And also in my career path, I changed my job. I followed my heart. It's like, what can bring me the joy of the not successful, like some fulfillment thing. Yeah, so this is the second thing. The third thing is, yeah, also family is a big issue for me, especially you can look from my, right? My family, they are in China. So I miss them a lot, and I'm a single child in my family. So my parents, they are aging. I don't know, I even cannot thinking what will happen in the future, right? What if they are getting sick? But I really love my job here. I really love the research environment here. But sometimes maybe at some point I need to do some trade-off. Yeah, so these are the three challenges in my career.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing all your personal experiences.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's something that everybody is starting to feel or will feel at some point, right? I see some people not know. So.
Just a follow-up on that. Do you have any suggestions who are just starting? How did you deal with these challenges? You explained your challenges, but any tips for how to deal with these challenges?
I'm too old for that.
It depends on your challenge, but therapy can help, exercise can help, friends can help. Those things are all, I'm not saying in that order. Depends on what you like, what you do the best. But yeah, I think that's kind of how you get through it.
The same to me, asking for help from different people. For me, therapist for your mental health and for your career. You can ask Joe how many times I bothered him. Even yeah. So I was not working in your group, right? But I reached out to a lot of senior scientists, ask for hey, yeah. So what's your advice for me? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Last but not least, Dr. Chris Kidd, Christopher. Dr. Kidd is currently a research scientist at the Earth System Sites in the Interdisciplinary Centers of the University of Maryland, working at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. He's a geographer, as he already said, having studied geography, physics, and maths at high school, and going on to study geography at the University of Nottingham, UK. His PhD on precipitation retrievals over land is from the University of Bristol, UK. After his PhD, he took up a tenure position at the University of Birmingham, still UK, teaching remote sensing, applied meteorology, and climatology, as well as research focusing on the retrieval of precipitation from multispectral, multi-sensor satellite observations and representations of precipitation from surface observations, both radar and gauges. His current work involves improving precipitation measurements from both operational and research satellite sensors. He's a previous co-chair of the International Precipitation Working Group and co-leads the IPWG SmallSat Technology Group. He is currently co-lead of the Precipitation Virtual Constellation Working Group of CEOS and a member of the National Academy's Committee on Radio Frequencies. He has also served on several advisory panels and committees for new satellite missions. He has a total of over 70 peer-reviewed journal articles and book chapters, together with over 200 conference presentations. Chris.
Yes.
Question for you. What is your favorite part of your job?
Meeting my colleagues. No, I think the biggest, the most favorite part is probably problem solving. You know, having the challenge and being able to solve the problem and, you know, trying to sort of do something that hasn't been done before. And, you know, sometimes, I'm going to say sometimes it doesn't work. In fact, I would say that most of the time it does work because you keep going at it until it actually does work, or you get something that's at least acceptable. So, I mean, I think, you know, this is why most of us are in this business. I mean, it is problem solving, it's finding out new things, you know, discovering new things. And so it's just sort of being at the forefront of, you know, scientific discovery, I suppose.
Rachel.
I think I have two, which is coming to meetings and networking, well, not networking, but collaborating, talking about science, getting that stimulation of questions from the broader community, just not just from myself, but then also I get to mentor a lot of summer students. So really mentoring students, which I think in faculty you get to do a lot more, but I really love when I get to work with students as well and try to be a mentor, not just as a mirror image of myself, but really like what's a whole person and where can they go in science or technology or something.
Can I combine the previous points? So why the problem solving? Yeah, it feels so good, right? Some challenges there, and you can connect different parts together to solve it. And also educating students, I feel it's very, yeah, sometimes we have a lot of like knowledge there. We always want to achieve like the higher level, but it's very difficult. And in the meantime, I found, I mean, if you can share this knowledge with students and you can see their eyes are shining, they are getting new knowledge. Why this feeling is very good. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next question. Yeah,
So-
boom, boom, boom.
This is a fun question. So can you tell us some of the fun facts about your career or life that you'd like to share with everyone? Rachel, maybe we'll start with you.
So I've always been a climate modeler. I've worked with climate modeling groups. I am not an observationalist. I use observations to evaluate models is probably how I use them. But so, and in graduate school, I studied tropical meteorology and I also did drought over the US. And to make a little bit more money, I was able to work at the weather station that Colorado State University helps. And my friend Jim is over there, and I'm pretty sure he's the reason I ended up knowing that was even an option, because I'm not a weather weenie, as we put it, at all. But so I worked at the weather station, and part of that was I live in Colorado, and we had to do snow observations, and we would have to go in a blizzard and measure snow, and sometimes do SWE, where we have to actually take snow and melt it and figure out how much water is in the snow in the ground, and then surface observations. And I'm going to tell you now, I was terrible at this job. And now I got my postdoc and I started studying snow and evaluating snow in models. And I work with these snow data sets and people talk about them. I'm like, people like me are making these measurements. So we just, like, they're not good. They are like, it's cold and I'm only going to do one sample when I'm supposed to do 5. And it just happens that humans being involved, it's hard to trust that. And so I think that's always, I laugh at myself now because at that time I did not study snow and never thought about what it would mean. And now I kick myself. So, yeah.
Snow is the most awesome thing.
Yeah, it's also the hardest thing to measure.
Berry, what's your fun fact?
My fun fact is, I'm now an assistant professor in the Department of Geography. However, I do not have the sense of directions. So previously I told people, yeah, I'm moving to Southwest. But I meant to say Florida, Southeast. Yeah. So my son always laughed at me, Mom, how could you lost the direction again? I said, come on, no matter what, I'm still a professor, right? At the Department of Geography.
This was a tricky one. I was trying to think, what sort of fun have I had in the last 34 years?
That's why we added live in the question.
I think that it's not necessarily a fun fact, but I mean, 2 things I'd mention is that one was an opportunity, okay, where I was in a restaurant in Frascati near Rome with Arthur Howe eating pizza, and that's how I got the job in the States. The second thing, which is a bit more salient and important, was that when I was at Bristol, I started working for the Oxford Cambridge something or other examination board, and one of our tasks was going around all the different schools in England, a sort of selection of them, and actually talking to students, 16, 18-year-old students, about their sort of project work. It's sort of an external viva type thing, which is, this is, people at sort of school, not university or anything like that. And, went to places like Eton, which is, of course, where a lot of the UK prime ministers went, unfortunately. We went to a lot of public schools where they'd wine and dine you in the hope that you might inflate their grades and things like that. But I also went around a lot of sort of inner city schools. And all I can say is that there were pupils at some of these inner city schools which were way, way better than some of those sort of private schools, because they could think for themselves. They had the ingenuity, they had the drive to do better. And I think that's a very important lesson. Not necessarily a fun fact, but I think, you know, it's worth stating.
Very interesting.
One thing you learn.
All right, so this is a big one. What is the biggest challenge in precipitation research, and where do you see your area of research headed in the future? Barry.
Very serious.
This is a big one.
Okay, I might be biased, so yeah. So in my opinion, the biggest challenge in precipitation is we always want the best data, right? We want the full coverage over the global. We want the best temporal and spatial resolution. For example, currently the weather radar can achieve like 1 minute or less than 1 minute, and like 1 kilometer resolution. And my research show, yes, the resolution does matter. Yeah. And so we always want the best, but we cannot get all of them. For example, radar is not available over ocean, but satellite, we have like the LEOs, we have the geostationaries, they have like, so you cannot get them all. So we have to put them together. We have to rely on the remote sensing tool to achieve the best product. However, the remote sensing needs the ground validation. So I would say, for remote sensing, of course, we need the technologies. They are like the challenges. However, the other side of the ground validation is also a big challenge. Yeah, because recently I found communication is very difficult. So we actually have a lot of ground measurements from different countries, different organizations, but how could we get them together? How can we get them together, put them to the like consistent format, do the consistent quality control that make them to do the ground validation for the remote sensing products. And also not only the simple comparison, right? I believe the next stage for the ground validation, we should go to the microfluidics. So not only to compare the rainfall measurements, this kind of like higher or lower, the same, but we need to look at the microfluidics with like the different hydrometeors, different processes, yeah, to help us understand the system. Yeah, so this is my opinion, but I'm biased. Okay, I'm doing a lot of ground validation. Chris.
Well, yeah, I've got two. I mean, validation is one of them, and sort of errors and uncertainties associated with both the satellite measurements and the validation data. Now, of course, this is sort of technically something that I've been working on for years and years, if not decades. And I think one of the big problems is how to define things. You know, what was the original question to do with errors and uncertainties, and how do we express it? How do actual users interpret what we might classify as errors and uncertainties in, you know, when they actually use the data, when they look at the data? And that's a big problem. And so there's sort of two different aspects. There's sort of generating it from the, I suppose, the scientific point of view, but also generating it from the user point of view. And so you've almost got to do two separate things there. The second challenge, or big challenges in the future I can see, are the small and CubeSats. You know, as Lisa mentioned, I sit on the CEOS Precipitation Virtual Constellation panel, and also the National Academy's Radio Frequency Committee. And one of the things that you find that CEOS has this thing called new space, you know, buzzword, you know, and you know, they're very keen to sort of get involved with commercial enterprises and sort of improve our Earth observation. But of course, one of the problems there is that, you know, you take something like a lot of these new CubeSats, which have been launched by the commercial companies. I mean, you're talking about tens of thousands of those each year are being launched. and they're interfering with our measurements. So the question is that how do we cope with this commercialization of space versus the scientific use of space? And it's not just the sort of looking down on the Earth, but also a lot of the radio astronomy and just the normal astronomy people are getting very upset because, of course, all of these CubeSats interfere with their sort of measurements. So, there's sort of conflicts there, and it's getting to a stage now actually where you have one satellite operator who's now suing another satellite operator because they're using the same frequencies. So, you're getting that sort of commercial conflict as well. So, there are big challenges in this area in the future.
I have to comment on that because now remember I'm from Los Angeles and I don't know anything about weather or climate. When I started school and I took a class taught by Roger Wakimoto that was like radar meteorology and synoptic meteorology somehow in the same quarter. I don't know, but we learned about observing from space. I didn't know about this, and I was so stressed about all the junk that was in space and how it would like ruin things. I thought we needed to form a committee to like deal with this, and now I see that's really a thing. So anyway, but okay, so again, I'm not an observationalist, so I'm coming from a totally different perspective here, which I think is part of why I'm on this panel, is that there are careers in precipitation that are not satellite and radar meteorology. But to me, I work on water and snow over North America, but in large part over the Western US. So the heterogeneity of the mountains is very complicated, and we often are validating things against a few points. And those points are not necessarily chosen because of their representativeness of the region. That's just where they happen to be. And we're running climate models at these finer and finer and finer resolutions and trying to evaluate them and saying, what is a good model when we don't have observations? So I think it is being able to measure precipitation and snowfall from space. To me, this is a huge, huge issue, especially as I'm moving more into snowfall and realizing what these snowfall products we get from space are, and then being just like, well, this is what I have, this is what I have to use, but also not fully understanding the uncertainties associated with them and really what's happening. So to me, the biggest issue is we just don't know what happens in the mountains, but we're trying to do a good job with it. And I think for where our research is going, I'm not sure. I'm really interested in use-inspired science. So it's working more with different stakeholders and what's happening in that area, but also this issue with a lot of models when we're looking at snow, the atmospheric component generates, using microphysics, we get different phases of precipitation. We should know what's falling on the ground, but the land surface models typically then just take precipitation and temperature and make up what is snow. So we have this kind of decoupling between what the atmosphere says it should be and what the land surface says. And partly it's because we don't represent this well, but I think this is where a big gap is happening and needs to be really coupled into there, is using the microphysics from the atmosphere to drive what happens in the land surface. I think that's an area where things will be going. And I talked about that today at posters. So yeah.
I think this is awesome. I do snowfall retrievals.
Oh, good. I only learned recently.
We should do someday.
Also SWAT data versus what actually happens in like iMerge, which is what I want to use. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting.
This is awesome.
Yeah, I give up. I try to compare the snowfall product, right, from the radar data and also Snowtail, and I found MRMS, the snowfall product is extremely underestimated.
Yeah,
then I give up.
I don't think we know. Yeah.
And by the way, it's snowing, just so you know. Some excitement. Okay. No,
It's not measurable right now.
No,
There's
no,
one
yeah.
that it trains.
you can see it.
Okay, we'll now change our tracks a bit and focus on to more early career suggestions. So this question is mainly about your experience in initiating your network and connections. Like at the beginning of your career, how did you start building your network, and what was more important to you, like one solid collaboration or several small collaborative connections? And what suggestions do you have for early careers like us, like how to create a successful collaborations on that? Perry, do you want to start with that?
Oh, okay. Networking, right?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I should not be the first to talk about this because, in my opinion, okay, nowadays people talk about networking too much. Yeah, so and also networking is very abstract word, right? What is networking? What is networking? So especially for people like me, I'm actually a little bit like introvert. I force myself to do networking, but I don't know what is networking. Until one day I realized that, okay, actually, when I was reading the paper and I have questions, and then when I'm in the conference room, I met the authors, I asked the questions. These are already the networking. Yeah, so I want to say, yeah, don't give yourself too much pressure to force yourself to like networking or some like, you know, some embarrassing conversations. Just, I mean, follow your heart. Again, follow your heart. You read your papers, you have some questions, just reach out to those you always respect, right? To ask the questions, to seek help. I think this naturally, this is a networking. And I grew a lot by this kind of networking, like question, asking question and get the answer, get the advice. Yeah, so in terms of like one main, what's the second question? Like
one solid collaboration or several.
Oh, okay. I think for students, I think the one main collaboration is very important. Yeah, because as a student, you just started, you need time to see the whole picture, right? And if you want to do like multiple things at the same time, you cannot focus well. And I think the student time is very precious. This is the only time you can really go deeper in your field to be like the expert. Yeah, so this is my thinking, because currently I have like multiple tasks. I really want to write some codes to really do some deep research, but I really do not have time. So I really miss my student time. I wish I could do more.
Chris,
well, since it's a long time ago since I started, I think one of the key things is finding a niche in the research area. Now, of course, when I started many years ago, I wouldn't say you could count the number of people working on precipitation from satellites on one hand, probably two hands, maybe three hands. There weren't many people doing it, and therefore it's quite easy to get into it. Of course, now you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of people worldwide. So there's a lot more competition, but then there's a lot more sort of areas to actually investigate, which I think is good. I mean, in terms of whether you should sort of concentrate on one small area, I would say that it's really a mix. It's probably sort of, you know, a 60-40 type split. Yes, you want to sort of concentrate on your expertise, but you have to be aware of what's going on so you can take on that work as well. I mean, when I was at Birmingham, I was primarily doing Precip research, but I did some LiDAR work over sort of Glacier Bay and places like that to do with ecology. So, you know, doing that, I mean, it's quite good because you can sort of diversify a bit, and, you know, if there's money coming in from there, then that helps to support your sort of research on a wider scale. In terms of networks, I mean, certainly some networking amongst your sort of, you know, similar age peers is very good, but also sort of make sure you get known amongst the great and good. And I think they're sort of delivering sort of, you know, key papers at conferences, you know, papers which are not just sort of a standard, you know, analyzing precipitation over the US in 1979 or something like that. It needs to be sort of quite sort of, you know, key sort of research, which will sort of hit home and make people sort of, you know, sit up and say, that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to acknowledge fully that this is a really hard question for me, because I don't feel like I've done this very well in my own career, or I don't have an answer. I've tried a lot of different things. I am an extreme extrovert, so you feel like this would be an easy thing, but it's actually really hard to build substantial collaborations. And so I would say, maybe don't cast your net too wide at the very beginning, because then you really want to have that one concrete relationship if you can. But I would also like to point out, it's, I think we all sit and research and visualize we're going to have this academic career, that it's going to be, I'm going to become a faculty member because that's what I see when I'm in school. So I would definitely recommend spend some time when you can networking with people in industry, network with people who have government jobs, network with people who are maybe doing some of the other stuff, because being able to see beyond just what you see at the university may be really helpful in terms of shaping your expectations for coming out of school or out of your postdoc. I think that's one of the things that's been hardest for me, is what were my expectations versus what I'm sitting in. I would also say connections can happen anywhere. So don't literally I accidentally sat next to a person on a flight that was completely unrelated to science who happened to work at NCAR. You know, things like this can happen. So be open to that opportunity about talking about what you do to people that you meet, and being just really open to that. And also people are all humans. We all have like our egos, but a lot of times people really do want to talk to you. So don't feel like you can't talk to them. I remember the first time I was trying to meet a famous scientist, I basically followed him into the men's restroom because he got alone at that point. And, you know, so things like that can happen. So don't be too embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed to send that email and put yourself out there and ask people questions. It's my advice.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But it's
That's
hard. I
really
struggle.
good.
So it's a hard thing. It's hard.
I mean, Chris had his job because of a pizza in Italy, right?
The current one, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of that was built upon earlier work they'd done with NASA, so it wasn't just out of the blue.
Right. I would also say, don't think because something doesn't happen immediately that you won't revisit it, and that it often takes coming back multiple times. You'll meet someone at a poster session, and then you'll see them again a year later, and you'll see them again a year later. And sometimes those networks actually turn into the thing. The people I work with now, I would never have thought I'd be working with 10 years ago, but now I am. And so just don't give up if it's not an immediate connection.
And also a little trick is like, sometimes you feel pressured if you want yourself, right? You want to talk about your work. Instead, a lot of times you don't have to talk about your work. You can ask the other people, hey, what's your work? Yeah. So through the question to them, they will talk a lot, and then the network will naturally happening. Yeah. So
It's a good one.
I got advice.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so our last question from us, and then we'll see what happens. We are going to talk about individual challenges, so diversity and inclusion. So Rachel, we'll start with you. How have you experienced biases or challenges being a woman in science? If so, does it get better advancing in your career stage?
Okay, so the answer to this question is yes, but it's, but a lot of it is unconscious bias that we are all experiencing at every moment, at every time. I'm positive that I have been overlooked for things or not been encouraged to do things because I'm more forward than a woman should be, or I'm more direct than I should be, or there's definitely a lot of evidence in the world that shows that we all, women and men, have implicit bias about thinking that men are typically better at science and math than women are, and that just is the way we walk in the world. I'm really lucky that I haven't had a lot of overt, really egregious things happen in my career, but I've definitely gone to conferences where he's Dr. So-and-so and he's Dr. So-and-so and I'm this. And then you just wonder, like, what is that person thinking? How is this possible? So there's little things. So I think what's more important here is just knowing. I've done a lot of training, I had the opportunity to do a lot of training about bias and diversity, equity and inclusion. And I think it's really understanding our own privilege, which I have a lot of privilege that a lot of people don't. And really trying to me, part of it is the inclusive part, trying to be more inclusive. I think that I'm more open to inclusivity and being more open to my own biases, which makes everything a lot better. So yeah, I don't know if it's gotten, I think it gets different as you move up in your career. Like especially the burden of being a woman and having a family can start to become a big issue in your career. And so it depends on when and if you decide to do that. And it's different as much as for men and women, although the role of men in families is changing as well. Sorry, this is not the most concise answer, but it's a hard question, and I wanted to be kind of honest about things. But I think for me, it's also really important to see women in the field and to see people doing in higher positions. And I think that's happening more, so that gets easier. And actually, as I move through my career, it's like people I know are also moving up. And so that's great to see as well. And also, at least at NCAR, this is becoming an issue that we talk about a lot. There's a lot more openness about it. And so I think that is probably improving things.
Great. And so Barry, same question, but we focus more on the early career, and also you are a foreign national, right? So how did this affect your advancement or something?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm good, but previously, especially when I just started, actually, so my lesson is do not let other people to define you. Yeah, so I remember when I started like in high school, I'm really good at math and physics, but the teachers is like unconscious. They assume girls will be good at like history, or actually by history I never passed the but at first when my teachers, they come to me and tell me, hey, your math is not good. I took it, I believed it, and it really hit me very hard. That I realized, no, I mean, I took the competition all the time. Why I should tell myself I'm bad at math because I'm a girl, right? And this kind of bias always there. It's like unconscious, but when you look at a female scientist, you will assume she's good at like communication or doing a lot of like science, social science work, right? I'm not saying social science is not cool, but people just will assume you not good at programming. Even my PhD advisor, glad he's not here today. So I remember I started the job and I did the comparison very fast. Within 1 month, I got the results out. The first question he asked me is, did you find someone to do this for you? Yeah, I mean, he's very friendly. He's just, I mean, it's just a lot of, something under there. He even did not realize that. Yeah, so the thing is, again, do not let other people define you. You know what you are good at. You know what you are interested in. Yeah, just go for it. Yeah, and also for my accent, I was struggling with it again. And when another PhD advisor, he's always very supportive to me, but he was also the one telling me, Barry, you cannot be a faculty because you have Chinese accent. Yeah, so of course I trusted him. He was super supportive. I have like a lot of family issues in the past. He always there, support me like my father figure. Okay, so I went to my friends who are the English professors. I said, hey, I want to get rid of my Chinese accent. I tried very hard, but still, I mean, I still with it until I went to JPL. So in JPL, I always had lunch with people, right? On the table, you will see only one American guy there. So we all from different countries all over the world. I suddenly realized there is like, yes, I have Chinese accent and you have American accent. Right? So then people told me, yeah, we can understand you. We can understand you. I think that, yeah, that's good enough. So again, do not let other people define you. If you have some dream, follow your heart, go for it. That's it. Yeah, and when you go up, move up, people will not think, they will look at you in a different way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice, I guess. And finally, Chris, you are a white male. So from your white male perspective, how do you see diversity and inclusion applied to our field?
Well, it's actually interesting because you say white male, that's very judgmental.
Sorry about that, but I just looked at you.
First looks can be deceptive. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing because obviously being a white male, obviously I'm going to be biased. Or am I? And one of the things you notice coming to the States is that people want to classify everybody, whether you're black, colored, white, male, female, anything in between. And in some respects, you're thinking, really? I suppose the key thing is that people are talking about it, which I think is the first step. And certainly the diversity and inclusion is better than it's been. There's probably some way to go, not least because it's a generational thing. That, you know, we still get people who have been brought up in the 50s and 60s, who, when you talk to them, they're incredibly sort of bad in terms of diversity and inclusion. But those people are moving aside and the new generation is coming up. So I can see it getting better. I suppose ultimately the position is, I mean, not relying upon the bean counters to count how many diversity and inclusion programs there are, but the fact that you don't need them. And I think that's the key thing, that, you know, that is a sign of sort of a fully integrated sort of society, when you don't need all of these additional programs to help people to get on board. And I think, unfortunately, I mean, that's going to take a long time, because a lot of it's got to do with the very basic education from day one. And until that's properly addressed, then you're always going to have some means of diversity inclusion programs later in life to sort of help sort of the less fortunate people to actually get on board, you know, at, you know, any particular stage in their career.
Well, thanks so much for being so open and, you know, honest in your own thoughts.
In my white male perspective.
Your white perspective. And we are going to open the floor, I guess, to questions. If you, there we go. We already have one. Just a second. We have
so that everyone can hear me.
Online attendees can hear.
yeah, our Dr. Hayden here, blue shirt.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see.
Yeah, I have a question. How do you secure your first grant as a PI? And was it something that you were passionate? Was it in the research area that you were passionate about? You know, finding opportunities and research don't necessarily overlap. How do you think?
So I switched fields isn't the right word, but I switched from tropical storms to studying snow in my postdoc and doing applied climate. So that was, I think, a little bit of a slower transition for me. I did write some grants that were not successful. So I will say at some point you can get into your career where you can have a list of like failures list. And at some point that you laugh at that because you're like, so many have been declined. So just be aware that this happens. I think I really tried to look at calls that were relevant to me. And I'm going to tell you now, like, depending on where you work, you're going to possibly have restrictions on where you're allowed to apply for funding beyond, I want to do this thing. So that's part of what happens. It depends on where you work and how you're doing it, but that can become a restriction where you're not allowed to seek funding from certain agencies because you work at a certain agency. But I think I just try to read RFPs, talk to different people, and definitely try to write something that was something I was interested in, something I actually wanted to work on. But also, as I'm starting to learn, it's not always, you can write the best proposal and it still isn't funded, unfortunately. It's part of it. And so I think it's a little bit of a numbers game. You need to work at it, you need to practice, you can ask for advice, you can work with collaborators, and hopefully you can find a mentor who can help bring you on to certain things there. That would be my thing.
Yeah, I mean, applying for research grants can be a lottery. I mean, certainly in the UK, typically research grants through research councils probably had about a 5% success rate. So, you know, it's a case of knowing whether there is actually funding available for your particular area, which often there wasn't. And even when you did apply, typically the general consensus was that we're finding reasons not to fund you rather than finding reasons to fund you. I would say that the situation in the US is quite a bit better. That it's probably maybe 25, 30% successful here. So that's quite a bit better than the UK.
Not recent calls.
Well, I bet
10%.
maybe it's a stage at my career that I can sort of see how to target things. And I think that that's the key thing is to,
Oh, your success is 25 or the program success of people who apply to it is 25? That's a difference because I say like success.
Well,
a lot of these calls are
yeah.
like 10% success rate.
I mean, it does vary an awful lot with the program you're applying for as well.
Yeah.
Because quite often you find that money is tight. I mean, some of the proposals, I mean, even if you looked at them, you'd think that should be funded.
Mhm.
So you can probably dismiss maybe 30–40% of the proposals anyway. And then of the ones left, obviously you have a better chance. But I think the key thing is to actually sort of read the information about what the call relates to and target that information. Not necessarily, repeat parrot fashion what they're asking for, but certainly take it on board and don't try and propose something that's tangential to it. Because if it's tangential, you're not going to get funded.
But if they say specific language on what should go into the proposal, use that language.
Yes.
Don't make the reviewer think, where did they put their work plan? Where did they put this? Say work plan.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a little bit of instructions there.
layout is everything. I mean,
Yeah.
as a reviewer, I mean, to be honest, you're not going to read 15 pages of a proposal thoroughly. Putting thoroughly to make sure that
You're going to read some. Yeah.
So the first page, put in an executive summary of what you're doing, because that's the thing that people are going to read, and they're going to be still awake when they read it. Everything else is just churning through, yes, background stuff, the methodology and stuff. I mean, yes, that's important because it tells the reviewer, how are you actually going to do the work. But yes, I mean, things like the work plan, if it says, there's a work plan, put in the work plan. I know with the NASA Roses call, they have basically a sort of table of what has to go in. That's what they're looking for. So make sure it's in there.
Yeah. You haven't said anything, so if you want to go.
Oh, okay. As an early career scientist, I mean, I still did not figure out how to get it because, I mean, when I was in Oklahoma, I mean, I thought writing the grants and get it is not a difficult thing because I got 100%. So I wrote one, I got it. I wrote the second one, I got it too. And also, meanwhile, JPL, they were sending me funding without me asking. Yeah, so they need me to do the work, but I'm already in NOAA. So I said, yeah, this is easy. I can do this. But because I was working at the NOAA, right, the federal government space, my advisors, the supervisors, they do not want me to working too much on the NASA proposal. So this is like the main reason I transferred to UF. It's like, yeah, I can write a lot of money. I can get a lot of money now. And then I failed. I failed once, I failed twice. Yeah, I even did not, I don't know. I mean, then I talked to people like with experience. They told me, hey, Barry, you know what? Sometimes either you already wrote the good proposal, but they have like their own plan to fund specific one, or maybe your proposal is not that good, but you can always improve it. So you take the rejection as like not yet funded. Yeah, so it will be funded in the future. Yeah, if you think it's a good thing. And also you need to talk about, reach out to people, see their advice, see their feedback. And another thing I want to point out is please be considerate. Why I say this? Because Gail, she invited me to review the NASA proposal. So I served on the proposal panel and I learned a lot. I just realized when you are writing the proposal, you are thinking about something, but actually when they review the panel, they are looking at other things. Yeah, think about everyone is very busy and everyone, so each review each reviewer, they need to like read at least 3 or 4, right? Proposals to read very carefully. Yeah, and also she or he should read other proposals like second reviewer. And we are already very busy. So how could you put your point visible or easy to find? Yeah, to collect to the core, to show off your, not show, I mean, to show your standing point, right? So I think this is be considerate. Sometimes if previously I try to say, okay, how fancy the work is, I put a lot of equations there to show it's so complicated. Reviewers, I do not think they have enough time to go to the details. Yeah, so I think be considerate is the key word. Yeah, think about if you are the reviewer, what will you look for? Yeah, but again, like I said, I failed since I moved to UF. So a very random thing for me still. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, that was very amazing and very useful suggestions. We have one online question. So the question is, what was your best and worst decision in your career? Chris?
You already finished your questions, right?
No, this is online.
Oh,
It's not us. It's not us.
The
So
best
Chris,
and the worst
yeah, we'll start with Chris.
Decision.
decision.
Mhm.
Yeah. Chris.
I don't know. Being indecisive, I think.
Yeah.
Indecisive.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very difficult question. I suppose ultimately, best decision was probably coming out here 12 years ago, because I was able to work on GPM before it started, get involved with that. Yeah.
This person will like my answer, which is, I'm at a place right now where I think about, you make decisions based on the information you have at that time.
Right.
And you can't really know if that was a good or bad decision until later. And even then, it's the decision you have to live with. You can't undo it. So there are things that maybe could have been different, but they're not different. And so I don't know if there's really an answer to that. They're not, there's not really an answer to that. Sorry. Yeah. I don't know. That's all I can say. I don't really feel like I've had good and bad decisions and some things can be a good decision, but seem like the bad decision for a long time. And then you get to the end of that and you're like, actually, that was a really good decision. If you'd asked me my last year of grad school, why I ever bothered to go to grad school, I might have said, I don't know, but now I have to finish because I'm here. But now that I'm finished with that, that's not my answer to that question anymore, so.
Yeah, the same with you. I can use my own experience. So I think the worst decision I made is when I graduated, I moved to JPL for my postdoc. Yeah, so I was working very closely with GPM mission, but when I was at JPL, I was working with the AS group. It's like, yeah, I was like so far away from the GPM mission for like several years, for a couple of years. So I was like, oh no, it's like I lost all the collections. And then I moved to NOAA, right, back to Oklahoma, working on the weather radar stuff. It's like my ALS thing, even they sending funding to me, but still like, so I'm feeling like I shift my work focus again. So I was feeling very bad. I was feeling, okay, so what about my old friends thinking about me? They might think Barry cannot stick to one area, this kind of thing. So I was thinking, moving to JPL would be the worst decision in my career. But meanwhile, I would say the best decision in my career is I chose JPL to do my postdoc. Yeah, because when I was at JPL, it's a whole new world to me. It's the first time I realized what I'm doing, like the research, and there are so many world famous scientists there. It's like every day, so I can have lunch with them. I mean, it's like previously I just do like I can only focus on like the weather radar when I was doing the PhD degree with the GPM, I thought there was only one GPM mission satellite out there. Yeah. So, but then at JPL, I feel like, oh my gosh, the world is so big, the universe, the cosmos is so big. I really opened my eyes. And also I got a lot of good opportunities at JPL. And not only my career, but also like, for example, my accent, right? This kind of thing, I finally is like saved myself. Yeah. And also another thing is I have to admit, JPL not only give me the career opportunity, it also brings me a lot of opportunity. So when I was at Oklahoma, when I sent out the CV for some job application, I would say like 50%, yeah, wrote the reply to me. However, when I was at JPL, even sometimes the position not match with me, but they still reply politely to me. It's like, hey, this position not match you, but we still, yeah. So it's very friendly. I would say it's privilege, yeah, brought by JPL. So even, I mean, in my career, so when I apply for other positions, when they look at my career, they saw the JPL and also later the JPL funding on my CV is always a very shiny point. Yeah, so I would say, you know what, life is like this, right? You make decision, you thought it's a good decision, you thought it's a bad decision, but it does not matter as long as you move forward. Yeah, and when you look back, all these thoughts, they will collect to align to become you. Yeah. Sorry, I feel like
I'm glad we agree.
Yeah, hi. Just thank you for the nice talk and discussion. And I think Barry just mentioned about the scientific question, like how to come up with good science question. It's an important step towards independent scholar. And I'm also struggling with that issue recently. Because I mean, it's easy to come up with questions because there are a lot of things you don't understand. But how do you define something that you come up with or you think is an interesting question that's actually like worth further investigation, or it's a good one? Or how do you even define what's a good science question? And most importantly, do you think for a student, being able to ask question to being able to ask a good question and then know how to solve it, like the process, is it possible to systematically trained, or do you think it's tricked? Because like it's something that your advisor would expect you to know somehow at a point by yourself, and then I just don't get it.
To be honest, I don't get it. So my way, when I was at JPL, I had a mentor. She told me, if you have scientific questions, you just ask for this program managers, project scientists, yeah, to get this feedback. So that's her answer to me. And she told me 99% of time, the scientific questions she brought up are bad questions. Yeah, but through this kind of, again, like asking questions, then you got feedback, finally you will come up with a good one. So it's like a learning process. And I want to say, so this is her answer. So I took it as for a long time. Then I went back to Oklahoma. So I got another answer for this one. It's like, if you believe this is a good scientific question, you stick to it because you see the knowledge gap there, right? You believe your work can have some contribution, then you should stick to it. If other people told you, no, it's a bad question, it's just that other people did not get it yet. You just keep going for it. And I want to say scientific questions always a very difficult one. For mission-oriented institution, for NASA, NOAA, it's actually easier because, for example, precipitation, we also want the best precipitation, right? But for science domain, NSF, we have a professor, senior professor. He was serving at NSF as a director for like a couple of years. So in his office, he put a very big sign there. What is your scientific question? Yeah, so I guess he's still struggling with the good scientific questions. So you are not alone. We are all there. but maybe these two have like better ideas.
Yeah, I think that's a very good answer. That there isn't a straightforward way of doing questions and answers. It's an iterative process that sometimes yes, I mean you need to sort of have some sort of central question, but sometimes it will sort of just change slightly to take on board new research, new results, things like that. So it's very difficult. I mean, I suppose for at my stage in the career to actually, when I look back, to actually say, yes, I mean, there is a sort of central question that, there are always these sort of little shoots which you may sort of go down sort of just to see whether that's going to work. And typically, you go back to your original sort of path.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is interaction with other people to sort of discuss things, and I think that's one of the important things, in terms of networking, that you can talk to people in a fairly open, atmosphere about things, sort of outside, dare I say, even the conferences, sort of down the pub or over a cup of tea or whatever. Sorry, a cup of coffee.
Actually, I just remember there is one practical way to define your scientific question. Yeah, the senior professor told me, you just read the paper, look at the future work part. Yeah, see their challenge and see if you can help. If you can help to answer that question, that will be a good scientific question. Very practical.
Yeah, I don't have an answer, so still working on it. Still like the biggest, hardest part of science, and also to remember what your question is, because you can get lost in the weeds, and then you've done a lot of work, and then you come back and say like, what was I trying to do? I would also say like my biggest challenge is that I typically make things too broad. And they're not answerable because they're so broad. And so it is like, start with that big question and then narrow it down and narrow it down. Other people may have the other problem where they feel like they start too small. But I guess if you start too small, you can build onto it. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Yeah, so I think, yeah.
We have another question.
Yeah, not for that.
It's okay. We can repeat it.
Okay. Also, I have one question for me and one question for my friends. The question for me is about how can you define your long-term research goal? My experience is because when I was in a master degrees, my professor working on hydrology. So I'm doing hydrology models. And then for my PhD, my professor working on urban climate. So I'm analyzing urban precipitation. And then I think after some stage, after I graduate, I'm a postdoc. And for my PhD, I may just work on one project. And then for my PhD, after my PhD, I may, as a postdoc, I may work on several different projects. And then after a stage as a young, assistant professor, I may have more freedom to choose. And then I'm familiar like several fields like moss sensing, climate, hydrology. So how can I define that this is my career goal? This is my research question for my long-term career. How can I find my passion around different fields? I'm confused about it. This is my question. And then
So for people
Yes.
online, the short thing is, how do you define your goal, long-term goal in your career, right?
I would say you have to be somewhat flexible, at least when you start out. That, I mean, certainly if you've done a PhD and postdoctoral work on a certain topic, then you sort of defined what you want to do. Although having said that, I mean, when I was at Birmingham, I had a couple of students who did the Met and Climate course. One had a background in zoology and came to do Met and Climate, and she's now actually working at Goddard in astrophysics. So, she's obviously gone from one to another. And in fact, another student who was at Birmingham. She's now doing volcanology at Goddard. It's a bit odd to have, I've got two MSc students at the same site, but I mean, you know, be flexible, you know, and, you know, if your current line of research, you know, fades or it doesn't interest you anymore, don't be afraid to actually change and look elsewhere, because as long as you've got a very broad skill set, I think that's the important thing, that you can take your experience from one particular area and apply it somewhere else.
I mean, I think my own internal talk is similar to yours, and I'm further along in my career of like, what do I want to do? So there isn't an answer. Unfortunately, I think being flexible is really important, because sometimes being open to a lot of different opportunities can help you. I think where you're going doesn't sound like you've jumped around crazily in my mind, actually. Well, I have a strong atmospheric science background. I'm now doing more surface hydrology. I'm kind of bringing, sometimes I think I need to go back to atmospheric science, come back to this. So it's okay to be flexible. I think also I'm a really experiential person. So to me, it's like what someone else is doing doesn't make any sense to me unless I do it myself. And so being open to trying different things until you find that thing is also okay. Yeah, and I've also never had more than like a 2-year plan. It might be the way my money has worked. But I think now that I'm here and I'm technically getting into this mid-career, I'm starting to envision, where do I want to go in the next 10 years? So maybe don't worry about 10 years from now and worry about the next couple of years, getting through the PhD and getting the most out of that. And then if you're really not sure what you want, start looking at postdoc opportunities. And if you think something sounds more interesting to you than what you've been doing, and that sounds more passionate, you can do that. I mean, it might be hard to go from zoology to whatever at that point, but especially if you stay within like a precipitation hydrology field, you can make these kind of like lateral moves. So just be open.
For me, I mean, you know, I'm an assistant professor here, so I'm still in the survival mode, right? I have some freedom. I do not have like 100% freedom. So my advice would be very practical. It's like, of course, you have your patient. You also need to look around to see what you have, what resources you have. For example, okay, I don't know your background, but for my background is now I'm in the Department of Geography. So they use GIS a lot, but our students, their program scale is not there. And we do not have any radar hardware here. Of course, I'm writing the funding, try to bring a radar here. We are in the radar dead zone. And also I'm actively try to work with GPM, right, mission, the precipitation group. Yeah, however, the situation is I might not be able to do a lot of retrieval thing, because if I do the retrieval, like the microwave, this kind of, right, so it will make me isolated from my department, right? So when I'm facing the tenure, when other people vote, right, so they will not care if we have Barry here or not, because I would be isolated with them. So I think, of course, you have your patient, but if you are also in the survival mode, like me, look at your surroundings, see what your resources you can get. So that's why now I'm developing the new direction for the environmental justice, climate justice. Yeah, because we have the best precipitation data, we have the best climate model, right? We have the best hydrological data, and we have a lot of people doing the social science in our department, right? So if I develop this direction, I can bring the whole department together. Yeah, so so this is some like a strategy thing. Yeah, and also I want to say is to develop which direction or multiple direction is like when you play the video game, right? Some people want to raise a lot of money without spending it, but some people try to borrow a lot of money to build a lot of buildings at a very early stage. So different people would choose different way, and I would not say this one is wrong, that one is right, right? So this is your life, and you just do whatever you want to do. Yeah, but just keep in mind is, how can you survive to get a tenure? You mentioned you are assistant professor, right? Or not yet, or oh, sorry. I mean, I mean, if you are assistant professor, if you are in your early stage, on your early stage, yeah, think about what you can get. Yeah, some support you can get. Then.
Thank you for answering. And I will be flexible to different opportunities. And my second question is for my friends, because my friends are some of them are just got their PhD, or some of them almost got their PhD. So now they are searching for other positions like postdoc or assistant professor or other scientist positions. And this stage I feel is very hard for them. And my question is, for in your career, research career, is it always time is always hard like this, or is it the hardest part? You got over this, it's done.
The answer is it goes like this. And the thing is that right now, maybe your career job thing is the hardest part, but in the future, maybe that's going well and the family is the hardest part. And I'm not gonna say it's always hard, but it's like this. And I would say if it's just like this, we've got to start trying to make adjustments, because at some point there can be a breaking point, but I would say it's very cyclical, but with no real power spectrum in terms of like when it happens. But I think it just comes and every time I go through it, I think this is the hardest, but really you just kind of forget how hard it was in the past.
Yeah. I mean, it is very variable. I mean, there are times when it is very hard, like when you're writing a proposal and things like that, and you're trying to get that,
or you're trying to get tenure or something,
or getting a paper through and everything like that. And other times when you're thinking, I should be doing something.
Or you think it's all great, and then a month later you're like, but it's hard again. So, and then hindsight is always, you look back and you think, if only I could have not been so worried about the uncertainty of the future and enjoyed the ride, then it wouldn't have seemed so bad. But that's the perspective you get later. So I think it can definitely get better. But it's also going to be hard, I think, again, unfortunately. Your challenges just change.
Positivity here.
Yeah.
Any other question?
So just follow up on the question. So what are the advices you will give to university graduates actually searching for a job?
Get on as many listservs as you can related to the field, because that's how you're going to find out that jobs exist. Put it out there in the world that you are looking for a job. Let people know you are looking. It feels so awkward to walk around something like AGU and say, I'm looking for a job, but that's kind of how it happens. If you're really struggling, be open to pivoting a little bit into what you might do.
Yeah, I would say that, looking at lists of jobs is terribly boring. But if you're at meetings like this, go along to posters, things like that, areas which interest you, and actually talk to the person there. And, maybe even just drop in to the conversation that, you're just finishing your PhD or whatever, and, you're looking for something. And, I mean, I sort of strongly suspect that a lot of jobs are actually, given that way. That
I think
says,
so. But you tell people you're looking, anyone and everyone. I know it sounds really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you just have to be sort of brave and upfront.
Yeah. Because we've also all been, maybe not everyone, but we've all been there. There are definitely, my faculty advisor, I think, had a job before he got, there's those people in the world you hear about, but not all of us are that lucky.
Yeah, I mean,
Something to add, Mary?
I mean, I don't know the question answer to you specifically, or because Alan, I mean, yeah, he is my he's my student. So during his 3-year PhD time, he published 11 paper, first all the 11 paper, including nature and all the BAMs. Yeah, so I don't know, you are still.
Have you applied to jobs yet? Or are you just worried that you have to apply for jobs?
Yeah, so yeah, I don't know, but a lot of times when I was when I was at this stage, I was worried, what if I cannot find a job, until one day one of my lab mates came to me. She told me, hey Barry, don't worry, so look around, so have you heard anyone did not ended up with no job, then like starving, right? No, actually, eventually you will find a job. And I have a lot of friends. Yeah. So one friend, he is a senior vice president in a very big company. Yeah. So she told me that, Barry, don't worry. You know what? All these problems is high class, right? High class problem. So when you say you cannot find a job, actually you have a lot of job opportunities. You always struggling to find, you want to find the best one, right? You always like to try to find the best one. So you have the high class problem. Yeah. So try to stay positive. I know it's difficult, but but yeah, try to stay positive. I think.
Like lower around this. Or at this stage that they will always look for higher.
You are not doing the postdoc, right? So you already have a job. I know you are looking for the assistant professor.
But that's a different thing. You may
So-
have to be more patient.
Yeah,
That's
and I believe in you. Yeah, sooner or later you will find one. You will land one. Mhm.
Thank you.
And also advertisement for Ellen.
All right, it's 8. We did an hour and a half of chitty chats. I think we got a lot of good advice here and good experience we heard from you. I would say we can just go downstairs, get a beer, get something to eat, tea for Chris. And
Yeah. Or gin.
and we can even keep chatting. I mean, it doesn't need to be formal, right? So that's why we are trying to organize a sort of gathering together downstairs at the bar. And thank you for coming. That was awesome.